Well, hello, everybody. It's been a while since Hans and I connected. We have actually met formally in Austin, Texas at things like Cybertruck events. We've always been in touch, going back and forth, and we've been on channels together. We know all the same people. And he is my authority on understanding the connective tissue between all things AI, compute, Tesla, you name it.
Mm.
You're the guy. How you doing today?
I'm great, and I'm really excited to be here with you today. These are obviously some of my favorite topics. I mean, we're staring down the barrel of a world 5 to 10 years from now that looks dramatically different than anything that we have ever experienced. And these topics are kind of right at the center of what is driving those changes. So that's why I spend so much time looking at these things, researching them, thinking about them, trying to understand the fundamentals of how they work, and then extrapolate from there forward into, okay, so what does that mean? What is that going to change? And how
Yeah.
do we prepare?
Awesome. And just so you know, everybody, if you're watching on my channel, Hans's links are below. He's streaming to his as well at the same time. I'm all about exposing as many people as we can because we got to get the message out. That is the name of the game here. And the story today, every Thursday now, I start doing these things called AI Impact and touching on the most important issues. But what I want to try get across the audience today is, we were just chatting beforehand about hedges and protecting yourselves. Like in 2017, your hedge was Bitcoin against the dollar going to poop. And here we are. We're in a new world where we need to protect ourselves. And we'll talk about everything else. But we're going to talk about inference and AI and how fast things are actually changing. Should we be concerned? Who is going to lead the race? We'll listen to the two authorities, I believe, after Hans, of course, Jensen and Musk, what they feel is going on. And we'll talk about edge compute and how AI is actually changing. We'll talk about brute force scaling and the size of different markets. I mean, we're going to try and knock this out in an hour. So let's get into it. Thank you once again, Hans, for being here. And Sean D, T&D, K8, the mods in the channel as well. Thank you all. Let's pop this up. See if I can. This is called the Inference Revolution. And we're going to touch on all things that you need to know about because this is important. And of course, never financial advice. First of all, this is a key little chart for me. And I always talk about how winners take most. And this is kind of sets the stage for where we are going into. And basically, it just shows you just 10 technology stocks since I think 2019 have driven 60% of the stock market gains. We're talking Google, Amazon, Apple, Broadcom, Tesla, Microsoft, Netflix, Nvidia, Palantir. Uh, that's just 10 names. The other 490, who cares? It doesn't matter. But I would argue, Hans, that in the future, it's going to become even more extreme. I would argue probably something like the big three will drive 80% in 5 years. So I'm going to park that in your mind and let me know your reaction.
It's definitely a concentrating world that we are moving towards. I certainly hope that it's not that concentrated, but it is very possible. And that's one of the things about, the nature of artificial intelligence is that if you can build something that makes itself smarter in a way that is independent of, some resource constraints that we have currently, then it's hard to understand what the upper limits of that intelligence are going to be. And then if you can't understand what the upper limits of the intelligence are, can you predict how dominant it would be in a finite resource constrained game like the stock market? And so that is one of the difficult things that we have to wrestle with.
Yeah, I like your approach there. The other thing that I did I think it was last week. I started looking at. I heard people talk about things like I'm kind of. I play all alpha assets. I don't care what form it is, as long as it doesn't harm people, like tobacco or nuclear warheads and stuff like that. But people were talking about the total addressable markets of things like money, Bitcoin, etc., being far larger than AI. And I'm like laughing my head off a little bit in a respectful way. It's like, no. So I decided to do the work and calculate exactly how large some of these TAMs are. And I compared Bitcoin and money to actually just the TAMs that Tesla is exposed to, and then took the profit margin on those TAMs. And basically, you don't need to know anything else. The results are clear. The total addressable market of this new world we're going into is massive. And we'll share some stats from some people as well, how many trillions we're talking about. But have you thought about the TAMs? It goes back to the very first question, how big this market is. You know, for example, humanoid robotics replaces, guess what? The biggest TAM in the world, which is salaries.
Human labor, yeah, of all sorts. And that is, I think people forget that asset, wealth management and asset allocation is a subset of what's left over from people doing a whole bunch of work and trying to save what they have for the future. And if you're able to go directly at the initial point that the value is captured and or created at the point of labor, that's obviously going to be much larger than just the little bit that's left over at the end for savings.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go. I like your little concise answers. It means we can get through our whole story. I just want to also remind another key thing is not only is the TAM huge, but the CAGR for the TAM is out of control. And there was a brilliant slide. This is funny because sometimes I have very little respect for analysts, but this guy is kind of special. He's from Morgan Stanley. His name is Adam Jonas, and he gets it. He's one of the few analysts that really has the smarts to see what's going on. And he talks about how knowledge economy has already been consumed by AI. AI has already absorbed everything into it. It's ingested every encyclopedia, every article, every video that's out there pretty much. And now the next leap is kind of, he calls it the physical economy. I call it embodied AI. Machines with sensors, actuators, self-driving cars, trucks, whatever, and how we manipulate the physical space for the even bigger TAM. A lot of people sometimes get tripped up on this. They believe there's no way AI has consumed the entire knowledge economy. But even Adam Jonas himself said, even my job would be gone. What do you say to that?
Well, it's hard to imagine a world where artificial intelligence isn't able to understand these things. When you look back at, so many different fields that we said, oh, AI will never be able to do that. It'll never be able to beat humans at chess. It'll never be able to beat humans at Go. It'll never be able to beat humans at StarCraft. And, one by one, these different things fell. And we always think that, just because we can move the goalposts infinitely. There's this thing that humans can do easily that these AI systems can't do. But what we're doing is we're building a synthetic form of intelligence that is learning. We're building it in a different way than evolution has built human intelligence and human consciousness. And so, of course, there's going to be areas where it's ahead of us and then areas where it's behind us because it hasn't followed the exact same developmental path that humans have followed. But the one thing that's absolutely clear is the trajectory that artificial intelligence is on is basically a straight line up and to the right to be able to do more and more things at a pace which was, pretty much unimaginable even just a few years ago. And when, if you had gone back 5 years ago and talked to people and said, hey, in 2025, we're going to be having debates around whether or not our artificial intelligence has reached AGI because it is actually better than every doctor on the planet just about at doing diagnostics, but it can't count the R's in strawberry. And so is this or is this not AGI? You don't know. Like, that person would look at you like you are crazy. And this is the type of, amnesia that we have. And so, yes, there is there are things that the models can't do yet. We are rapidly expanding their capabilities. It seems pretty outlandish to think that AI won't be able to do knowledge work jobs very, very rapidly. The types of domains that are easy to verify, like math and like coding, are already, rapidly being replaced by AI today. And then we're going to be expanding into more subjective domains increasingly in the coming years as well. And I think one of the bright spots in all of this is that it does seem like there's a great symbiotic relationship right now between humans and these AI tools. And that humans with AI seem to be a lot more powerful than AI by itself or humans by themselves. So that's one of the glimmers of hope in all this. We don't know how much runway there is left for that dynamic to play out. Hopefully it's large, because that portends a much brighter future than one where humanity kind of goes off by itself. But yeah, the dynamics of the way that these things do reach superhuman performance are somewhat concerning about our ability to continue to go along that ride.
You touched on something there for a second, and that was kind of coders. And you probably are well aware that 3 years ago, 4 years ago, people were urging their kids to go to computer science for, college, university. And now all of a sudden, they're probably coming out of their 3 or 4 year program, and they discover that everything they've learned cannot be done by a machine. Just the pace of that time frame has changed everything. We'll talk more about the coding options that are coming down the pike as well, or already in existence. But what else could be next for it to be completely disrupted, at least from a third level education point of view?
So yeah, math is a huge thing that has started. It's getting much, much better at math. And this is one of the areas that getting better at math then allows these artificial intelligence systems to explore new ways to build artificial intelligence that are at the frontier of what we have even begun to think about today. And that's the biggest, most high impact, and also potentially scariest domain that these things can get better, because you can check very easily, if you can figure out a mathematical formula, you can check very easily whether or not it is correct afterwards. It's trivial compared to, you can verify the truth much more easily than you can generate the first formula. And that asymmetry means that these neural nets and artificial intelligence systems can try lots and lots and lots and lots of different things. And then they, just by the power of brute force, trying a million different ideas, and then it is computationally basically free to verify, was this idea correct or was this idea wrong? Then you can tie that together into what's called an RL loop, a reinforcement learning loop, that gives the neural net the reward to find, okay, hey, these are the correct paths to continue to develop down. And as long as it gets those rewards often enough, if it can find the signal in the noise of where to actually make progress, then that thing can actually converge to a level of mathematical capability that is far superior to anything that humans have done. And if math is the universal language of the universe, then that gives it a godlike power compared to us that is unfathomable.
This also touches exactly what you've just said, touches on one of the things that Elon said, that next year or even late this year, AI will discover new science and physics. That dovetails nicely in there. As you also mentioned,
all of that science and physics is, bound up with the math that, underpins those sciences and the physics that people are exploring. So those two things are really tightly intertwined.
Yeah, so it's a good time to be a nerd, perhaps, huh? Is that what you're telling people? At least what I always do is I urge people, in a place like California, they're trying to do away with the math syllabus. And I was like, no, it's the most important thing. It's the lifeline for the kids. Anyway, you mentioned brute force. Let's talk about some brute force as well. Either you're reading my mind or I don't know what's going on. But the bitter lesson, which I was watching a pod with you on it. I can't remember who it was with, but you've been speaking about the bitter lesson before it really became trendy. And that is the brute force of actual scale of AI, and what Jensen always says Elon has done with Colossus 1 and Colossus 2. He said Colossus 1 is superhuman. I don't even know what Colossus 2 would be. And it reflects that bitter lesson, the brute force hardware scaling, more chips, more power. There is no second best. If you're not first, you're last. You have to win. it's a winner-take-all race, which goes back to the very first point I made. And when you look at this data too, it's kind of startling in terms of who is winning. One player, Musk Industries, has nearly half of all compute. And it doesn't even include 7 million, 8 million cars, which soon will be inference capable, which we'll talk about later. But can you tell the audience a little bit about your take on the bitter lesson and how important it is in today's world?
So the bitter lesson is an observation that a professor named Richard Sutton has made that really is just extracting takeaways from the experience that we have so far developing these AI systems. And so, the example that I think we referenced a little bit earlier of AlphaGo being able to become the best Go playing system in existence, that system went through an evolution where at first they used human games and human data to try and train the underlying AI agent how to be good at the game of Go. And that actually worked decently, but it didn't really get better than the best humans. It, kind of lived with inside of the distribution of human outcomes. And so if you wanted to get beyond that, they had to figure out how to re-architect the system from scratch. And so if you think about a game like chess or a game like Go as a finite bounded set of, there are many, many, many moves, obviously, in chess, and there are many, many moves in Go and many different configurations of the board. And it is such a large number of moves and configurations that to our human mind, it seems infinite. But computationally, it's not infinite. It is actually, a finite number of configurations, a finite number of moves. And what they did was they allowed they pitted the system against itself. You just play. We're not even going to tell you what the rules are. This was the ultimate endpoint of what they did. We're not even going to tell you what the rules of Go are. We're just going to put you in. And if you lose, we're going to give you a slap on the wrist. And if you win, we're going to give you an attaboy. And so since there's two different versions playing at all times, one always wins and one always loses. And so they're always getting the signal, good boy, bad boy. And by doing that and just letting it play a number of games that is, practically infinite compared to what a human could play, they were able to fully explore the solution space of the game of Go and find optimal strategies for winning that humans had never discovered before because they more deeply explored the search space of possible solutions to the game of Go. And so that is the process of reinforcement learning, where you have that ability to play the game and then get that reward that says you won or you lost, that is objective and definable. And so this is, one of the same reasons why things like code and math are the next areas that we're looking into, is because code and math give you that yes, you're right, or no, you're wrong type of signal that's very good for reinforcement learning.
Yeah. There's a very interesting question that just jumped in here from Patrick. A lot of people are very concerned about things like quantum computing because they could hack all of our systems, including things like Bitcoin protocol. I don't believe we're going to get anywhere near close to qubits required to get there for another 8 years. But tying into what you're saying from Patrick here, is it possible that AI models could get to the power of quantum with that self-learning you're talking about?
It's definitely an open area of research. I'm not super knowledgeable about the research that actually tries to combine AI and quantum. It's obviously a field that you would think has a lot of overlap. And so there are people that are thinking deeply about this, but it's far enough down the timeline that, it seems like it's kind of over the horizon of the singularity to me. And so I haven't focused on that as much as trying to think through the things that are happening in the next couple of years more deeply. It is a fascinating question, and it is potentially something that has huge implications as well.
Absolutely. It was a great question from Patrick. But yeah, I like where you're going with all of this and the way you're thinking. And we will be talking now about reinforcement learning in a minute. But I want to get back to our little journey. First of all, and this just goes kind of into where we are today in terms of the marketplace. We talk about winners taking most and the leading AI players. But I want to spend a second talking about what I call the talent magnet, the mission over money story. We had Zuckerberg for the space of about 6 or 8 weeks throwing billions at hiring people. $100 million non-refundable sign-on bonuses, $250 sign-on bonuses, massive packages, crazy. And even with that, Elon Musk manages to poach 14 of Meta's best engineers by offering them kind of, as he says, mission. Things like the mission to Mars, infinite abundance, AI for humanity. And that type of stuff makes him uniquely attractive over money rather than nine-figure packages. But my bigger thinking is maybe these AI engineers are so smart that they know for them to really make a change, they need to have the most compute and the best leader. What do you say to this? This is always found very interesting. Maybe there are some good people that aren't just motivated by money, but a greater good.
Oh, yeah, it definitely, I think there's several things at play that are tightly bound together. So in order to have the best AI systems right now, as far as we can tell, the first principles that you require are algorithms, data, and compute. And this goes back to the point that I was making about the bitter lesson. And what Richard Sutton had discovered was that having a very simple algorithm like that and lots of data from reinforcement learning allowed you then, if you combine that with enough compute, to reach these superhuman outcomes. And so those three things are incredibly important. You need the compute, you need the data, of course you need the energy to drive the compute, but that's really a subset of the compute. And then you need a good simple algorithm that is able to actually scale to incredibly high levels. All of those things can be accelerated by talent. And so being able to assemble the right talent that is correctly motivated is the difference that we've seen with what Elon has been able to accomplish with xAI compared to all of these other players. That he has come in afterwards. We've seen Elon has kind of been a background personality in this entire development of artificial intelligence that he funded DeepMind.
Yeah, well, he funded OpenAI.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So he had developed a relationship with Demis Hassabis and Ilya Sutskever before Google ever even bought DeepMind. He's been following closely how this field has been developing, and he was hoping to be involved without being too involved, and really he just didn't want to see AI accelerate too fast. And I think he kind of inadvertently contributed to its acceleration by trying to hedge against Google with Sam Altman by starting OpenAI, and that really kicked this thing into high gear. But after having spent a decade on the sidelines roughly, he decided, okay, this is happening. It's happening now. I have accidentally accelerated it, and now we have got to get in the race, and I've got to actually be a contender. And so he's assembled this incredibly small, high talented, and then highly motivated and rapidly moving team. It's essentially the SEAL Team 6 of AI development. And so when he's going to the people at Meta who are essentially trapped inside of, an infantry battalion of AI development at Meta, if you're a SEAL Team 6 level player in this game, do you want to work in an infantry battalion, or do you want to go work with other SEAL Team 6 level players?
Drop out of a helicopter with 5 friends. Yeah.
And so, Elon has the resources from the compute that, Zuckerberg doesn't have. He has lots of compute, but he doesn't have these coherent large clusters that are all networked together that are able to think about one problem as a unified brain, the same way that, xAI and Colossus have been able to build. Elon's, he's already built the biggest one. They're building ones that are even bigger that make the ones that they've built look small. They're clearly out in front in the area of compute. They have practically infinite access to data. They have algorithms that work. Every one of these players is sharing algorithms kind of in between them. Like, even if they're not sharing them explicitly, they're able to reverse engineer them after they've been developed pretty quickly. And so, algorithms are pretty much a level playing field between OpenAI and Microsoft and Meta and Anthropic and xAI, all these people. So really, they have to compete on compute, data, and talent. And so this is where Elon says, okay, I'm going to win compute. And then we're going to figure out the data.
Talent will come. Yeah, they have
the
the
talent
most
will
real
come.
world data as well. You touched on something, because we will talk about hedges as well, life hedges. The reason why people are watching this show, you need to protect yourselves and your families. You mentioned something absolutely fascinating, and but to listen to it so succinctly, Elon Musk always had his finger on the pulse of AI. Then he had a conflict with one of the Google founders. I can't remember which one.
Larry Page.
Larry
who
Page.
Was insufficiently specious. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, to save humanity, etc. Then he funded OpenAI to start something to hedge against Google. And now he's doing his own xAI to hedge against OpenAI. Do you think that's funny? Or is it, or more of these hedge opportunities going to happen as time goes on?
It's incredibly hilarious. I mean, the most entertaining outcome, as defined by a third-party observer, is the most likely in this scenario. Elon has been scared of the arrival of superintelligence for a long time.
Yep.
Tim Urban wrote some really great articles back in the mid-2010s about this, and a lot of his source material is source material that Elon was also very familiar with and had very similar feelings around that time. And I think that's one of the reasons why Tim Urban even got the invitation into Tesla to do the articles that he did on Tesla and SpaceX and Neuralink and all of the different things that Elon was involved in. And so those pieces really articulate Elon's fear that existed at the time that Google acquired DeepMind. And, he knew what DeepMind was onto. And it scared him for Larry Page to be somebody who owned and controlled the things that DeepMind was working on. And so, I think this always was always destined to be a race between Elon Musk and Demis Hassabis, who is, I couldn't really think of two better humans to be in the pole positions to work on this problem. Sam definitely gives me the heebie-jeebies. And
he's a bad actor.
Yeah. So, I think involving him in all of this was not a wise move on Elon's part. And so then the question is, can Demis make whatever Google builds in this arena be as positive sum for humanity as possible, or is it being contained within the Leviathan that is Google, such a corrupting force that no, that's not possible? And that's the thing that Elon is scared of, and that is the reason that he decided to go all in on this race, so that he can have direct impact and direct influence. And I think it's very good for this technology to be developed in an ecosystem of competition where the individual players really have to contend with the downsides of their specific approach. And I think this is good for Elon as well. I think it's actually good for Elon to have to contend with Google and DeepMind and OpenAI and Sam as well.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Okay, we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about the elephant in the room, that I call it, the thing that some people think is 35 years away, some people think is next year. And that is, first of all, I'm going to burst through a couple of quick slides here. Jensen Huang, the guy that everybody ignored since 2020, talking about AI and everything else, the rest is history. But he is massively bullish on Tesla Optimus, the humanoid robot. And he's funded scores of other robot companies, which is interesting. But the key here is he believes it's just around the corner, aka 2026. And it's very likely that humanoid robots are going to be robots we can deploy into the world relatively easily. And the first robot that has a chance to achieve the high volume and technology scale to advance this technology will be the winner, and he believes that is Tesla. That's slide number one. Number two, he said, if I can zoom into this and read it. Anyway, it's going to be a $50 trillion industry. The winner will probably take 10 trillion, which is big enough, maybe 20 trillion. We'll see how far this goes. But what's going to be very important for this is the brains of these robots and the hands and the ability to operate in our human world too. And then Elon Musk said Tesla Optimus will be the biggest product ever, and it'll be 10 times bigger than the next biggest product ever. Think of the market cap of iPhone, for example. iPhone makes up more than half of Apple sales. You could call it a $2 trillion product. If it says 10 times bigger than the biggest product, that's 20 trillion. Are we mad here? Ground us with some reality, Hans.
Well, I mean, just imagine that you could have your own fleet of domestic servants that cost you basically nothing to do all of the work around your house and in your businesses that you needed to have done. How many of those would you like to have?
A lawyer and a sushi chef embodied in the same person or bot.
Yeah, who can also fold your laundry and, wash your dishes and do all of the things. And so like, you probably have enough things that you would like to have done that maybe you would want several of these. Like you would like to have the one that's the lawyer working on lawyer things most of the time, and the other one that is the, housemaid robot doing housemaid stuff all the time. And so these are products that will cost definitely several thousands of dollars each. I mean, when we get to the scale of billions of robots, we should be talking about sub $10,000 cost to make each of them. Now, obviously, they're going to be providing a lot more value to you than a few $1,000s. I mean, that's literally like if you could sell them for, we'll just say $10,000. That's literally 10 iPhones. Like, would you spend 10 iPhones in order to have something in your home that could cook all your food, clean all your dishes, wash all your laundry, and keep your house immaculate all the time?
In the blink of an eye. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the question, like I said, just goes back to how many of those do you want? Probably quite a few. And so then when you start doing the crazy math on having multiple of these bots per human in order to provide the goods and services that these humans want at those types of price points, and you don't even factor into what you'll sell the software that runs on them for, you get into nutty numbers.
Yeah. Exactly. And the real thing that people always forget, we just heard about BYD imploding and we said, oh, BYD is a Tesla killer. We all know Elon Musk pivoted away from cars a couple of years ago when he did the Walter Isaacson book, because he knew autonomy was it. It's like fighting against the Chinese to build a $10,000 EV is just a waste of time. You got to go bigger. So he's always years ahead. And now BYD has huge cash flow problems. They don't have the technology. They still hammer things together. But the point I'm trying to make in a long-winded way is nobody on the planet, no company can manufacture at scale as good as Elon Musk. Do you believe that?
100%. Especially when you're talking about cutting edge products. There is no better integrated large machine with technology than Tesla vehicles. It doesn't matter what other car you buy. No other car is as smart as a Tesla. And that integration of the software with the hardware, you've got to execute the hardware well, and then you've got to integrate that with the technology. And it is the Apple iPhone of vehicles, but then doing things that even Apple now is struggling to do. Apple is not able to integrate AI natively into their ecosystem and their platform very well.
It's shocking.
And Elon is integrating AI natively into the vehicles better than anyone in the world. And so to have that combination of the manufacturing chops with that Jobsian ability to integrate hardware and software at the bleeding edge of technological development is unparalleled.
And they couldn't even do it. They couldn't launch Grok in China because it's not allowed. So they integrated DeepMind. like that.
Mhm.
While Apple is still trying to figure out how to make it work. There's a couple of questions here that I want to tackle because they're very important. A lot of people call us like sci-fi enthusiasts. We
Mhm.
seem to overestimate the near future, but who knows? And then what was the other one? Are we getting ahead of ourselves? It could be 10 years before the bots are that nimble. I'll give you a little case in point. And this was when did the Cybertruck event? It must be a year and a half ago now at this stage. I walked the production line of the Cybertruck twice. I actually made a video on it. There were no human stations on that line. Okay. So these were bots assembling a very complex, sophisticated truck that's laser engineered to have flat panels and bulletproof material and crazy stuff like that. They are robots, but people can't wrap their head around the jump from being a series of robots that do specific things like put windscreen glass on the car, put the doors on the side, put the battery pack underneath the exoskeleton, put the wheels on, all that stuff. They can't make the jump from that to a humanoid serving a hamburger or something. Can you help us? How far are we away? Are we just mad sci-fi enthusiasts? By the way, I don't like sci-fi. I never did, so I'm definitely not a sci-fi enthusiast. I've never seen a Star Trek or a Star Wars or stuff like that. But help us make the leap here.
Well, I definitely think there's a valid criticism in there, and I'm actually not nearly as bullish on timelines around when the Optimus robot is going to be able to do anything and everything. As a lot of people, I think the magnitude of the challenge of developing, the Optimus robot that even works well, much less be able to sell it at those, sub $10,000 price points. I think that's many years in the making to get to that point. That we could be, you know, deep into the somewhere around 2030 before we really hit an exponential acceleration in the deployment of those. Now, I could be wrong, but the combination of actuator technology and battery energy density that's going to be necessary, and then compute efficiency, like it's going to be hard for these things to really get to the types of scales that people are thinking and wanting in these 1, 2, 3, 4 year timeframes. I think we're really going to be pushing out past that. But as far as Tesla's concerned, we are going to be seeing massive cash flows rolling in from the Robotaxi in between here and where the humanoid robot project really takes off.
Yeah.
And so you have that hedge right now for Tesla that we're going to be monetizing artificial intelligence at a very high level in the interim period, and that experience is going to inform their ability to both manufacture and develop the ultimate form of the Optimus robot.
Yeah.
That said, the long-term upside is just so, like, I am both more bearish on the 1 to 2 year time frame than a lot of people, and then I'm more bullish on the possibility past that, semi near to midterm time frame.
See, this is where I get confused because Jensen says right around the corner in 2026, and Elon says they'll be doing productive work in the factories by the end of this year. And we did see this yesterday. Mark Benioff, the chairman CEO of Salesforce.com, he was visiting with Elon at the factory and playing around with the Optimus robot. Yeah, it was an off-the-cuff demo. There was a little bit of lag, but this thing was able to walk him to the kitchen and show him where the Coca-Cola was, as he asked. So I don't know if this was remote controlled or not, but the point I'm trying to make is we have cars that can make split-second decisions. They can analyze the environment from 8 different cameras and make a decision in 40 milliseconds. Help us make the leap from the car to the bot to make a decision and to be able to talk.
I think that the journey that we've been on with full self-driving over the last few years is very instructive for this, that it's taken a lot of time to hammer out getting those nines, that it really takes of reliability in order to make self-driving work. Now, obviously, in a safety critical situation, that's going to be even harder than something like the humanoid robot, where the stakes aren't as high for it to make a mistake. But you still have to get the hardware to a point where it needs to be able to walk fluidly all the time and like never fall over, because this is at this stage of the game right now. this hardware, like that prototype is probably $100,000 at least to make that one robot. And it doesn't really walk around well enough to where you can just never worry about it falling down. And you really need, if you are spending $100,000 on this thing, you'd like for it not to fall down and accidentally break. And that's like the reality of the prototype phase that we're in right now with these humanoid robotics, is that they're fragile, they're brittle, they can't do useful work reliably over the long term in a way that makes their, like ROI to invest in this at this stage in a massive way positive for you. But it is obviously on a steep trajectory to lower in cost. And once it is reliable enough and costs get to be low enough, then the ROI makes more than enough sense to invest aggressively. And so we're just like, we're anticipating that this is where we're going to be. And so we're just massively investing in this field. And so like the robots are going to be here. We are going to be doing useful work with them. We're not going to be making money on the useful work that we're doing next year. The robots that are going to be deployed to do that are going to cost a lot more. They're going to be a lot more fragile, a lot like cost of ownership to maintain them and do them. All of that stuff is going to be upside down for some time before we really reach that economically self-sustaining point in the cost curve.
Well, there's two things that you know from Elon as well. It takes the third iteration, the third version of the product to be really cooked. This is the third version. And I noticed something that I haven't heard anybody else talk about, but the color is the same color as the Cybercab. So there could be a little bit of a theme there that these things will work hand in hand and look familiar. But either way, it takes us to my next question. The bots are coming. There's no doubt. The question is how soon. And you did confirm that there's only one company that can manufacture these at scale with extreme high quality. I have a 6.5-year-old Tesla Model X. It's been so perfect, flawless. I can't even sell it. How would you ever depart with something that's so good? But for years, we heard about limiting factors. The batteries limiting factor, transformers limiting factor, compute limiting factor. I've got two new ones for you. And I want to know what are your two or one limiting factors for this world of bots, of compute, of AI? I believe my two concerns, if I was sitting in the board of Tesla, I'd be worried about energy and I'd be worried about magnets. And if you know, because you can create free energy from magnets. So they're both kind of linked at the hip. What are your thoughts on what the limiting factor could be in the future?
Yeah, definitely. Energy is obviously the huge one, and obviously that's also consensus that the national conversation has started to just recognize how important it is for us to grow energy. China is deploying solar at a pace that is absolutely dizzying right now, and we have got to catch up if we want to compete. Not only solar, but also the nuclear plants that they're building. So they're just like going all in on let's have as much energy as humanly possible. And then, you've got to have the magnets if you want to turn the electricity into work. And we don't have a good supply chain right now that is resilient for magnets and independent of China. And so this, kind of geopolitical tension that we have going on with China right now makes this a difficult thing to navigate. But obviously, Elon is, this is one of the things that makes Tesla so good at manufacturing is they don't just stop at manufacturing. They really do get into the supply chain. They will embed with the supply chain if necessary. They'll go back as far as they need to solve bottlenecks. And so, they work directly with miners all around the world. They have done a lot to try and de-risk their supply chain from China. And as they're looking at these types of products like the Cybercab and like the humanoid robot that are going to scale to very, very large numbers compared to, products that are made currently, they are already thinking about, okay, how do we make sure that we can secure our supply of whatever magnets? How do we reduce our reliance on magnets in the first place? One of the things about the way that they developed the powertrain for the Cybercab was they wanted to get away from using permanent magnet motors entirely.
Exactly.
And so, or not permanent magnet, but they didn't want to use rare earths, I think it was, in their design. And so, yeah, like they're thinking about all of these things.
Well, imagine I came to you 10 years ago and I said, imagine a world where the two superpowers would be trading graphics cards from NVIDIA for magnets, and they are the two most important commodities. Would you think I was completely nuts?
I think most people would, and yeah, I might have been I might have been one of those people back then. It's hard to say.
Yeah, crazy. Okay, let's talk about the big topic, which has been burning my mind for probably all of this year, and it's inference. Okay, and we're going to go deep on this, and this is going to be a little bit nerdy, but basically, inference, as Jensen once again said, he's like my AI forecaster guru. He's my mystic Meg. Will be 1,000 times bigger than training. AI inference token generation has surged tenfold in less than a year. And as AI agents become mainstream, the demand for AI computing will accelerate. This is absolutely big. It's no longer about training, it's about the inference. And we know who has the largest amount of training. But let's talk about RL, reinforcement learning, and why this is so important and how training is changing.
Yes. So, well, let's set the context first that inference, so training is how you create this synthetic brain that does, like, the only reason that you create a synthetic brain is because you expect it to do some useful work for you that is going to be more beneficial on the backside for you than the resources that you put into it in the first place. And so to actually run that model to do whatever that valuable stuff is, that's what inference compute is. And so once you've tuned this, multi-gigabyte or multi-terabyte program that can do interesting and useful things, then you run that program on an inference computer, and you can run those inference computers in the cloud. Like, so if you're using ChatGPT, if you're using Grok, if you're using any of these LLMs, you are using an inference computer that is somewhere in the cloud that's then taking in your information, processing it through the synthetic brain, and then sending the result back out to you. But the thing that Elon Musk is doing with the cybercabs, the thing that the humanoid robots will do, something that is going to be just an exploding market, is things in the real world that actually have an inference computer in them and they are doing intelligent work. And so you can imagine having a lawn mowing robot at your house that mows your lawn. Well, it will need an inference computer in that robot in order to do that work for you. And so this is what inference is going to be, that the world around us is going to be transformed. When people think about the Internet of Things and having everything around them be this smart, intelligent device, there's going to be neural nets and artificial intelligence models running on all of those devices. And, the chips that will do that there will be quite a variety of them depending on, how much smart work you want that thing to do. Those chips can be as small as little cell phone chips that are embedded in things, but they can be even larger computers like we currently see in the, all the Tesla vehicles, the AI4 computers. Jensen Huang just released the AGX Thor inference computer that's going to be a platform for people to develop robotics on. And it is a Blackwell GPU, which is, the same chip that goes in the data center computers that they're selling like hotcakes right now. They're packaging a format of that is, a very small thing that runs on a couple of 100 watts that you can put inside of a robot and connect together with all kinds of sensors to do cool things. And, like, the first principles of this is just obvious that, you are going to need to put that intelligence to work in useful jobs.
Yep.
In order to make the investment of training a model in the first place make sense. And you have to do way more work than training in order for that to work out. And so, like, the magnitude of compute that's going to be allocated to this inference, which is the application of AI to work, is going to be much, 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 much larger than the magnitude of just the training compute. And then, so that's where we get back into, so this slide is showing that even in the process of training, so this reinforcement learning that we've touched on several times today, is doing inference passes on a pre-trained model to then improve the capabilities of it even more. than we had originally. And so this is how we're getting really good at things like coding. We're taking a base pre-trained large language model like GPT-4 or Grok 3 or any of these types of things, and then we're selling it. Okay, hey, make this code for me millions of times, and then any of the times that it works at the code, it gets it right, then you give it a thumbs up, and if it gets the code wrong, you give it a thumbs down. And that process, then you feed back into the training. And so you're just doing lots and lots of these inference passes on this narrow domain that you're trying to get better at, that you have some incredibly powerful reward function for. And that process makes your base model way smarter. Like, this is the process that AlphaGo went through in order to get to superhuman level performance in chess, but we've never been able to do that to a general model. And so now we're trying to do what we did with AlphaGo with these general model foundations, to make them better at all kinds of things. And that requires just an incredible amount of computation in order to get there. And so OpenAI announced, this was their progression that they were trying to follow, that, hey, we're going to start with, just this big ball of pre-training compute in GPT-4o and no RL post-training. And then 01, hey, we're going to give it RL compute now afterwards, just a little bit. It actually gets better. And so let's turn that up and make it even larger for 03. Oh, it gets better. So obviously this is a progression that we want to continue. And eventually we'll get to the point where we're doing far more RL compute than pre-training compute. And that RL compute is done on the exact same type of hardware and compute schema that inference would be done on. And so we've got inference style compute growing within the corpus of training and then growing in the final application. So we're going to have a ton of inference in final application to do real work. And then we're going to actually use a portion of that inside the data centers to continue to just grow, the compute that we're throwing at training these things.
And this is the crazy part we mentioned at the beginning. The continuous reinforcement learning loop makes this AI be in a position to create new mathematics, new science, new physics, all that type of stuff. But that's ChatGPT. This is where we are today. And this is probably a more important vision as well. Let me hide my current comment. Put us on the bottom. Walk us through here how Grok has already leapfrogged what ChatGPT is doing with this reasoning, inference, reinforcement learning. Help us build the connective tissue between reasoning and reinforcement learning.
So if you remember in the OpenAI post, it says GPT-N, which is like we're going, we're heading in the direction of doing lots of pre-training eventually. We're not there yet, is what this says. So then Elon said, yes, obviously that's the direction that all of this is going. I need to beat you to the finish line. And so, they did Grok 3 reasoning. And for Grok 4, they 10x'd the amount of RL post-training compute that they assigned to the model. And so if you go back to the OpenAI slide where they had GPT-N, like they're doing equal amounts roughly of pre-training and RL compute in Grok 4. They're building Colossus 2 right now, which is 5 times larger than Colossus 1. And so Grok 5 will probably be a big step towards having that model that's going to have actually significantly more RL post-training that is applied to the base model than the pre-training.
So it could make up 90% of the actual
if not 90, at least 60, 70, 80%, it's going to be far more than OpenAI can throw at this problem. And so they're going to be able to produce models that significantly outperform OpenAI, is the anticipation.
And let's go back to rate of change, rate of progress, because this is where people get tripped up. And I've been hammering for years and years that humans have a tough time understanding exponentiality. I don't even know if that's a real word, but I use it all the time. They can only think linearly. They can't think exponentially. Talk to us about this rate of progress just in the space of less than 2 years.
It is absolutely insane that they have even been able to be within striking distance of the conversation of who is at the top. And there are a number of domains at which Grok right now is the top model in the world. As we mentioned earlier, Google, they also have a lot of compute. They have a lot of data. They probably have more data than God, just about. They have great talent as well. They have energy. So it seems like Google has been holding back on what it is that they're willing to put out to the public. And so
I also believe they've got more. They're not showing their cards, but they're afraid of two things. One, maybe being specious, or two, cannibalizing themselves. And they've begun to tiptoe into the cannibalization of themselves with search right now as well. But this is a question I love engaging with we'll get back to this in a second, but this came up because it goes back to power. And a lot of people are very afraid. China is building power at 10x the rate that the US is. They will create more power this year than the entire power production of the United States has today. When you think about that and the correlation between compute and power, China will lead AI unless somebody can figure out a way of creating that abundant power. We'll get to abundance in a second too. Good Lordy, we could talk for hours.
Yes.
But let's try. What's your take on power?
So this is definitely something I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about. The one, saving grace that we have in the United States is that we don't have to rely on the United States government to lead in this sector, that every single deep-pocketed hyperscaler on the planet is thinking about this problem. And we don't necessarily have to locate all of the energy that is needed for this technology development here in the United States. There's big investments right now that are going on in the Middle East specifically for this reason. But Microsoft and Meta and Oracle and, all of the Amazon, all of these hyperscalers, they all see this and they're all investing aggressively. We've got quite a bit of natural gas power generation capacity that's going to come online in the next few years that's going to be able to fill in the needs that we have for building out these AI data centers. And then behind that, it is very likely that we're just going to get into an aggressive phase of building out solar and batteries, and that the vast majority of all of the infrastructure investment that's going to come into that is going to come into that from private parties, private market, or public market, but non-governmental, non-regulated utilities. And there will be some tension there, but I think the free market actually is going to be something that drives us into a world where we are keeping up with China in their development of power, and not because the Secretary of Energy understands the difference between energy and electricity, but because the CEOs of all these companies absolutely do, and it's business critical, and they will not let us fall behind.
All right, so let me tell you about my little ace in the hole. I actually came up with an idea of how we could create power from something I used to do as a kid. I'm working on that. But another way that we could overcome the need for power is what has been burning my head all year. This is Tesla AI Inference. And basically, inference, as we discussed, is the process of applying the trained AI models to real world tasks. And as AI becomes more prevalent in the world, this real time inference will be incredibly important. Not training, that'll be done, but the resource intensive inference to give people on the edge or in their device or in their car or their Optimus robot to make decisions for others when they're idle and not driving or doing other stuff. But I was fascinated by the Samsung deal, the AI6, Elon saying he'd have to degrade it to make it exportable. But the point is, and this goes back to Jensen Huang at the beginning, it'll be 1,000,000 times more important, okay? Edge inference versus cloud inference versus training. Training will be a nothing burger, okay? Cloud inference will be pretty high and still very much required. But the edge inference, $1 billion question, the $10 trillion question I have is, could it be done using vehicles? That's what I've been talking to you for months now. I was like, we gotta figure this out, because this would do away with the need for power. It would kind of like obfuscate the
Mhm.
need for all these nuclear power stations and everything else, and won't let China run away by having 8 million cars, maybe 10 million cars, maybe 20 million cars with AI6 chips in them in 5 years. Thoughts?
Well, it doesn't eliminate our need for power because you still have to charge the batteries of those
Yeah.
cars, and that energy does have to come from somewhere. But it allows you to distribute that load much more widely, and there's huge benefits to that. And especially, I think it's highly likely that we're going to be able to have a superhuman level artificial intelligence driving agent that functions perfectly well on Tesla hardware 3 computers within, you know, 6 to 12, well, yeah, 6 to 12 months after when that happens on hardware 4. So like it'll take them a while basically to port that backwards from hardware 4 to hardware 3. So it's like, okay, if that's possible, if you can have a superhuman driving agent that can run on the equivalent of hardware 3, and yet we're continuing to install hardware 4 now, we're going to be installing hardware 5, then there's going to be hardware 6. Like, doesn't that mean there's a lot of extra computing capacity in your AI 6 Tesla Model 3 or your AI 5 Cybercab than is 100% necessary while you're driving? Yeah, it probably does. And so you can even imagine a scenario where even while they're driving, they have spare compute
Yeah.
that can be allocated to
Triple
all
redundancy or
sorts.
double redundancy.
Yep.
Yeah.
All sorts of different applications. And then definitely when it's, in your garage, that you could even have a world where, and I think there's going to be a lot of demand for this from people, for you to actually own your own AI that lives at your house, that lives
Yep.
behind firewalls. It has security, it has privacy all built into it. And that's not, something that you rent from a hyperscaler at their benevolence, but is something that you own as a sovereign individual, and it can work on your behalf and, provide you with security as well. And so like that is a computer that you would want to actually be physically co-located with you and have access to lots of your things as well. And that type of product would need to run on a secure and energy efficient computing device, whether that
Yeah.
comes from NVIDIA or is something that is manufactured by Tesla and is their residential version of an AI6 computer. I think that's definitely the direction that this is going to head in the long term.
Yeah, I think and I had it in a previous deck, I think last Thursday, Jensen again talked about the second inning of the AI revolution. And that was, I think, perf per dollar, the amount of very high effective and efficiency compute per dollar of compute, or perf performance per watt, which directly drives revenues. That's going to be the key metric. And I know that one of the reasons why Tesla built their own inference chips was because all the other ones were too power hungry. They couldn't have that. They couldn't run a car and have a hungry chip in it. So they had to be maniacally focused on not only making it extremely powerful from a compute perspective, but also very power efficient.
Yep.
Yeah. So
yeah, and they were well out on the frontier of this. It has been good to see, Jensen put quite a bit of effort into this area. That their AGX Thor compute is actually quite efficient as well. It has quite a few tops, runs at low power. My guess is that AI 5 and AGX Thor are going to be, roughly equivalent in terms of tops, and which is just the number of operations per second that can be done and the power that they're using.
So net, we agree this could circumvent some of the power usage, inference at the edge, from cars.
I think you get into the Jevons paradox thing where you can do economically interesting work with power that makes your demand for power go up. And so we will end up like, yes, we'll be much more power efficient. We can do a lot more useful computation per watt. And then we'll decide, hey, we actually want more power in total. And so we're still going to grow the overall amount of power that we're going to consume,
This is,
5 to 10 years
I
from
tell you a
now.
funny story. I probably shouldn't say this, but I know somebody who has a grandmother, and she is in a place that's very cold, called Minnesota,
Mhm.
and she gets very heavily discounted electricity. I don't know what they have up there, hydroelectric power or something, probably like some of Scandinavia. And he runs Bitcoin mining machines in her basement that heats her house. And here we have Patrick Lind in Sweden. We heat our houses 10 months of the year, almost none done with electricity due to price. Heating houses with inference chips might be one idea. I don't know how hot
Mhm.
AI6 is going to get, but it'll be interesting.
Mhm.
Just another interesting idea. I think there's a lot of ideas around energy creation. I know Elon's thinking about them, so that'll be interesting. We've got 2 or 3 more quick topics. We have to touch on Master Plan 4 because that came out in the last few days. The sustainable abundance story, which came as no surprise. I thought it'd be a 4-point plan. My first 3 points led to point 4, which is sustainable abundance. Did a video on that about 2 weeks ago. But what do you think of this? Again, it ties into energy and everybody having everything because the robots do all the work and create all the value and the infinite GDP and the infinite ROI from having your fleet of robotaxis to provide for you and your family. Is this all nonsense, or do you believe it? And if you do believe it, how far is it away?
These are definitely all of the primitives. I think that's Elon's effort here, is to really provide all of the first principles ingredients that are necessary for us to have that world of sustainable abundance, because we do need to return to growth in a big way, and it needs to be broadly distributed growth as well. And so, how do we make that broadly distributable? That's a big question, but there's clear correlation between countries that have high amounts of energy and their GDP. And if we can provide people with large amounts of energy at low cost, and then on top of large amounts of energy at low cost, you also have labor in the form of labor and transportation, really is what you're looking at here. That we everything that we consume right now reaches us by ground transport of trucks at the very least. Usually lots more shipping as well. But we could dramatically decrease the cost of transportation with Tesla Semi and the Cybercab. Doing that has a deflationary impact on lots of goods that we own. When you then layer in Optimus on top of that, the ability for us to create the goods in the first place at lower prices is incredible. And so then the only question is, okay, what are the humans actually going to do for work where they can have an income to spend on these cheaper goods and services? And that's the unanswered part of this question in my mind. But I think that our ability to deliver, goods and services at much lower prices in the very near future is pretty much inevitable.
Yep.
I think 5 years from now, we live in a much different world than the one we live in today.
Exactly. And in fact, Robotaxi, we've got the app all on our phones now. They just opened up release last night. Shout out to Austin, Texas. I'm using my Austin cup in honor of your neck of the woods, Hans. I know you've been around the Robotaxi a lot.
Yes.
But this was interesting. This tweet last night, Elon said as well, expanding access very soon. Everybody can download the waitlist. Some people weren't able to get to it, but it might be because they're in Michigan or some other part of the world, not California Bay Area or Austin, Texas region. But the other piece is the safety human is gone by year end. And Elon said as well that this will fund a lot of the path to sustainable abundance. So we know that Kathy Wood says, Robotaxi, $7-10 trillion value to Tesla. And then the bots, as we saw, 20 trillion, 25 trillion, 30 trillion. The numbers get nutty. And that's why at the very beginning, I did say, can't remember the first chart. The winners take most. I believe in the future, the big 3 could drive 80% of the stock market value, not the big 10 driving 60%, because the amount of wealth concentration and wealth generation, profit generation will be insane. And that all dovetails. So we don't need to kick Robotaxi to death at all. But I do want to talk about another quick thing, and I found so funny, was the MacroHard versus Microsoft. And this goes back to not just edge computing and inference and all that type of stuff, but the fact that for Musk, it's less about the competition, but he believes he could replace entire enterprise software solutions or applications by doing this with AI. And it goes back to your reinforcement learning, your looping back. How exciting is this to know that this could put a pin in a company like Microsoft? Shout out to Bill Gates and all of his bad things that he does. Sorry.
Well, I love, so even just the trolling
I know, it's
that
brilliant.
Elon is doing here with the name, you know, it does create such a great meme. And then, you know,
Yeah.
memes really are powerful attractors of
and
talent.
he knows that. He knows that better than anybody. Yeah.
100%. And so, you know, I know for certain that the possibilities that we have with AI right now are unforeseeably large. And so if you can organize the right team of incredibly smart people with the right tools around a powerful meme, that you know, who knows what the ceiling is on something like that. And we could be looking back, you know, 10 years from now at the beginning of you know, how did that MacroHard, you know, get started? What is he, you know, what is Microsoft?
Exactly. Well, you know, another feud between Elon Musk and Bill Gates. Bill Gates is famous for shorting Tesla for many years and losing billions. And in fact, if
While
Bill Gates,
supposedly being a supporter of
the green
a
energy scheme, the green
sustainable
new
energy,
scam, and
yeah.
it just shows you the quality of person that he is. But it's even more hilarious if you go back and analyze, if Bill Gates had held his Microsoft stock instead of selling it to do other things in the world, he'd be a lot richer today, which is another separate
isn't
issue.
Steve Ballmer,
He is richer.
you know, he's richer than Bill
Because he
Gates
hodled.
now because he held all his Microsoft stock.
Exactly. Precisely.
Yeah.
The math is fun. But Grok, Code Fast One, and the whole democratization of tools, again, goes back to what we also spoke about at the beginning, is kids going to college for 4 years to learn computer science. And now all of a sudden you got your own coding agent in your pocket. But I want us to take to one other thing, two other quick topics before we wrap. I know we've gone over the hour. I promise not to go long. But this is what everybody says, oh, AGI is not going to be here for another 35 years. No way. Well, Kalshi betting markets believe it'll be here. 25% of people voting on it with money believe it'll be here next year, i.e. before 2027. Before 2028, 40% believe that. So when you add up the 25% plus the 40%, you're pretty much close to guaranteed it's coming in the next 2 years. 54% believe before 2030. What do you make of all this madness? AGI, is it real? Elon Musk says we'll probably have it next year.
I think the fact that we're arguing over this so much tells me that it's already here. You know, there's still humans in the loop. We're still, you know, it is improving. It is improving recursively. It is on the path to exponential recursive self-improvement. And it's just a matter of tightening up the iteration cycles and removing the friction of humans. But this RL path that we are on, that, you know, we mentioned how that is the thing that broke AlphaGo out of its local maximum of being trained on human data. You know, I think the application of that scheme, that strategy, to these large language models and just the generative AI models that we are building right now that have this general foundation in the first place, is probably going to get us all the way to artificial general intelligence a lot faster than most people think. You know, undeniably, probably 2 years from now.
Yep. So before 2027.
And I think, yeah, this is a continuum that we've already begun. So like we are on this like development path. You know, it's already better than us in a number of ways. There are other ways that it's behind us. And yeah, like how do you define the point at which you have reached AGI when it already is better at you than so many things? Like, are you there yet? Or, you know, what is the final point necessarily where it happens. And that's where, I would agree with Joe Bhakti that this is a continuum. We're already on it, and it's going to slap everyone in the face really fast. Like, it's already just displacing so many jobs. And
exactly. And that's why the final topic today is this guy, Dr. Roman Yampolskiy. He's been working on AI safety since like 1985, before anybody was even talking about it. And he believes we're on a steep path to complete labor automation. He also mentioned as well prediction markets, so I pull that in. And top AI experts believe we'll have AGI before 2027. And that's the capability to replace most humans in most occupations within less than 2 years today. And he expects humanoid robots in 3 to 5 years before 2030 to wipe out a lot of physical work. And he says it's going to create unemployment unlike anything we've ever seen before in the history of the world. And he said not just 10% unemployment, but 99%. It's very, very dark, ominous forecasts. But this guy has been doing nothing but studying AI and AI safety for literally nearly 40 years.
It's a incredibly scary potential scenario, and a lot of people are very, very worried about this. And the fact of the matter is, whatever happens, everything is going to change very rapidly. And like, at the very least, you can predict that based on the speed of change and the magnitude of the change, that there's going to be a level of societal shear that is extremely disruptive, and is going to create a lot of displacement, a lot of difficult things. Like, we live in a time in history where we get to enjoy the benefits of the Industrial Revolution at a level that humanity's never seen before, but that actually did come at a cost for a number of people. That the Luddites who lost their job, they weren't mad at technology for no reason. It actually was destructive to their livelihoods specifically. And we're going to be living through something similar at an accelerated timeline and on a much larger time scale. And so, this is one of the reasons why I spend so much time researching this. This is one of the reasons that I want to own the companies that are part of creating this, because, we can think far forward to the future. Well, wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where all of the menial tasks in your life are taken care of, and that you can focus your time and your energy on the things that you like to do, the things that you want to do, the things that you actually derive meaning from? To do that, you need to have your time freed from mundane things.
Yep.
So that's the positive view of the future that we're trying to build all these tools to provide. But okay, what if you don't know where you get your meaning from? Or, how do we get to a world where everyone actually has access to those robots and that intelligence, that it's not just concentrated in the hands of a few and outside of the reach of the many? Those are the hard challenges and the hard questions. And the answer is, I don't think any of us really know right now. But this is the type of world that we need to be preparing for.
Exactly. And we're already seeing signs. I've been referring to this thing called UBI Nation for years, because I see the tipping point where more than 50% become dependent on some form of benefit or welfare or food stamps or housing or pension from the government. They will vote for the party that pays them the most. And then we go beyond the tipping point of 50%, and then it becomes socialismus, UBI Nation, whatever you want to call it. And we're seeing that happen even in a place like New York City. The home of capitalism on the planet is becoming socialist. It's really like when we talk about the exponentiality, the pace of change and how things are absolutely spinning out of control so fast. You just need to go open your eyes and look around the world. This, as you said, Hans, this will be a very different place in 5 years. Very different. And that's why we make videos, so audiences can learn and hedge themselves. And as Joe Bhakti says, I think he said, I hope I'm not putting words in his mouth, but we have to become, and I say this in a less elegant way, capital allocators to save our lives. We cannot depend on wage slave to get ahead. It's not going to happen. You've got to get creative with how you invest to hedge your future. Agree?
100% agree. And then think about where you place yourself geographically, culturally, in order to ride out this wave, because it is going to be extremely disruptive. And, it's the reason that David Freeberg from the All In podcast has been harping on this theme as well recently. I think
Oh yeah.
we've only just begun to see the rise of socialism. And understandably so, that the people that are demanding these outcomes are not doing it for no reason. And that's, I think, the one of the big challenges that we're going to face as a society is how do we handle taking care of one another, in a way that maintains incentive structures. Like I think free markets and capitalism are one of the great wonders of the universe. And I also think that the sheer in a society between the people who have the most and that have the least is very disruptive and has to be managed as well. And that this is something that creates the cycles that we watch over and over and over again in history.
Yeah.
And we're going to be living through those times.
It was an interesting video with a guy called Patrick Bet David. We got to do this again real soon. We got so much to talk about still. He interviewed people who are anti-capitalist, but the people that he was interviewing don't understand. If you give the government $4, they will create $1. If I give you $4, you probably create $40. And that's the difference. So if you want that abundant life, you have to give it to people that know what they're doing, and they tend to be capitalists or capital allocators or wealth creators. And that's it. Good point here from Matt, quality video. People really enjoyed this. They love having you on. Don't forget, links for hands are below. I know we're running real late and I feel guilty for taking so much people's time, but I actually put this little thumbnail together many years ago that people really need to amplify their intelligence. Never has it been more important to understand what's coming down the pike. Scary stuff. Prepare. We're ringing the alarm bell, and I have been since November 2022 about AI after I saw ChatGPT. Any final thoughts, Hans?
Well, I really appreciate you having this conversation. I love being able to share the things that I've learned, the hopes, the fears, and then continue to ask the questions that we're asking about. Okay, massive change is coming. How do we prepare? And then how do we try and also think about the best ways to serve our fellow human beings through this change as well?
Exactly.
Educating people is a huge part of that. It's going to have to go beyond that as we really get into the thick of the fallout in the coming years that we're going to be facing as well. And yeah, just huge kudos to everyone who really puts in the time to watch and listen and think about these ideas, because they are incredibly important. I hope that you got a little bit more well-informed today. And yeah, this is, some of the central questions that I've been trying to explore on my channel as well. I have been looking at xAI specifically because they're, one of the key players in this whole race right now pretty extensively recently, and trying to bring on artificial intelligence researchers or commentators, people who have deep knowledge in this area to really get a better understanding, and have been, I think, one of the things that I've been researching that hasn't made it out onto the channel yet, that's going to probably be an increasing portion of the content that I'm going to be creating, is really looking into this evolving inference space, and where does NVIDIA sit within that? Where does AMD sit within that? Where does Samsung? Where does TSMC? These different players that are going to be shaping that landscape of inference compute, and then, the tighter loop of training and inference as well. How is all that going to work? Because it's going to be an incredibly important set of first principles dynamics that shape all of these outcomes that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's one other point just came to mind as well, that I want you to share with the audience. A lot of people are talking about, the AI bubble is over, it's dead. We are in the first inning, I think they say in baseball. I could have that wrong, or cricket or something. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's a bubble? Or
No,
has it even begun? Where are we?
I definitely agree. So we may be, there may be a little bit of over exuberance in some certain areas, but the overall trend is there. It may take a little bit longer than some people were thinking, but the overall trend is there. We're not talking about the tech and telecom boom bust and then boom type of time frames where we went crazy in 1999 and 2000, and then we went almost to zero based on that, and then outgrew it over the course of the next 10 years. This is going to be a much more compressed life cycle. And, one of the things I just cannot give Jensen Huang enough props for, he is creating platforms for people to build immense amounts of value on top of.
Yes.
The iPhone was the platform moment that created the Web 2.0 boom of the 2010s. And NVIDIA GPUs and CUDA, and then the Omniverse, and all of the tooling that they've created around science and now robotics for people to do this research and build these transformative new products. That is a foundation that is being laid, and it's going to be choppy. Like, when does, each new vertical take off and, provide the returns? We don't know, but Jensen is seeding a whole field of new applications for artificial intelligence to provide transformative results for humanity. And there's guaranteed to be huge returns on those. And it's just kind of, you got to figure out, when is the timing for each thing? When is genomics going to hit? When is synthetic biology going to hit? When is, robotics actually going to hit? We're making rapid progress in all of those things. And so, like, I think people are vastly underestimating the magnitude of what is coming down the pipe.
Yep.
And, but yes, they might be a little bit over exuberant about how fast all these things are going to come just here. They overestimate 2 years. I think they underestimate 5 years.
Definitely. I agree. Either way, it's coming fast. It's going to be bumpy. Everybody, thank you for coming. Remember, Hans details below. Very knowledgeable guy. Beautiful conversation. Probably one of the best I've had this year by far. Thank you again, Hans. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Don't forget,
James.
Get prepared, get hedged. It's coming, and it's coming faster than you think. Bye, everybody. There you are. Thank you, bud.